What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you've known me for very long, you will know that I believe a good photographer should put extra time into pre-production and post-production. And those are the things that set us apart as artists. Anybody's nephew with an iPhone can go out and take a pretty good shot, and it'll save them most of the time. But the real discernment, the real quality in the artwork, I believe, comes from what you do before the shoot and what you do after the shoot. Mastering the technical skills of photography, I mean, that's important, don't get me wrong. We're not going to say that a photographer shouldn't know how to light and compose. But the part that sets, the thing that sets us apart one from another is how we prepare for the shoot and how we edit our photos afterwards. So today I'm going to be taking you guys through a little tour, a little tutorial on how I edit some of my photos. We'll be taking a look at one of the budget costume photos that I did in Tuesday's video, and I hope you enjoy. Here we go. First thing I like to do is I like to import all of my photos into Adobe Lightroom. Instead of using like Adobe Bridge or something like that, I prefer Lightroom because I can get a quick overview of what each photo is going to look like, and I can call the good ones from the bad ones. So the first one we're going to be taking a look at is this photo right here. I think it's a pretty good shot. It's a nice close-up headshot. The exposure is just fine. For the intents and purposes of this video, though, I'm going to start from resetting completely my settings here in Lightroom, which it already is because this photo has been untouched. Now, I don't actually edit my photos in Lightroom. I'm not a fan of the quick skin retouching and preset sort of lifestyle, and Adobe Lightroom can't utilize layers, which I think is the most powerful thing we have when we're talking about how to edit a photo. So I'm going to right click this photo and edit in Adobe Photoshop 2021. Now I will, however, edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments so that whenever I go to save my photo, it comes back into Lightroom and I can export it from there. Now that I've done that, that photo will be open over here in Adobe Photoshop. The first thing we're going to do once we're inside Photoshop is I'm going to right click on my background layer and duplicate it. Now what this does is allows me to save an original copy of the image in case I mess up or want to roll back to how I originally started. With that being said, I'm going to select my new layer, the background copy layer, and the first thing I'm going to do is apply Camera Raw Filter. Camera Raw Filter allows us to change the white balance, change a lot of the color grading effects, calibration, those types of things on our image. Now, most of this stuff here is going to be however you feel like this image becomes the most aesthetically pleasing. Just play around with the sliders and see what you get. Normally here, I like to go with a shoot like this, I like to swing it towards yellow in the temperature and green in the tint. And I'll just find where I kind of like that best. But overall, I want this image to kind of give off that creepy vibe. So for this particular image, we've gone with 26 temperature and minus 32 tint. Next up, this is just a personal preference of mine, not something that everybody should do. Again, it's image specific. Do however you feel like you need to do. But the next thing I like to do is jack my shadows like way up. I want to get as much dynamic range out of this as possible, and I lower my highlights really low. Then I'll come down here to dehaze, and I'm gonna just add some dehaze until I feel like the image is a little more clear, and clarity until this image is a little more clear. It almost increases the sharpness of the overall image. I'm also going to add some texture because I really like that gritty look. And now once we're at this point, I'm going to push some contrast, not a crazy amount, maybe it is a crazy amount, I don't know, how about 42? And I will lift the exposure a little bit. We'll go to plus 0.8. I'm also going to increase the vibrance just a little bit, so it's a lot more punchy. Next, under the detail tab, I'm going to add some sharpening and a little bit of noise reduction. And this is just so that I have a little bit more clear of an image, some of those details that are in focus pop just a little bit more. And the last section we'll take a look at here in Camera Raw is the calibration section. And again, this is just personal preference stuff. Play with these sliders and see what you can get out of it. I'm going to push this one toward the shadows towards green a little bit here. I will play with the red slider and just go to the extremes. See what it's going to look like. I don't really want it that yellow, so I'm going to come back here and leave it a little more on the red end. And do I want to saturate it more or desaturate it more? I think I kind of like a little bit of a desaturated look. It makes it a little more creepy. We'll go to the green primary, and I think I'm going to take that down just a little bit. I don't know here. Let's see. We'll desaturate that as well just a little bit, and our blue primary. Okay, so we've ended up with, let's see, minus 50 in the shadows, minus 23 in the red primary hue, and minus 50 in the saturation. For green primary, it's minus 36, minus 35, and for blue primary, it's plus 10. And we'll hit OK. And now that our image is updated, the very next thing I like to do is go to my dodge and burn tools. I'm going to start with the burn tool in the midtones with an exposure of 13%. And I like to keep these numbers low so that I can stack the effect and blend them together a little bit better. I'm also going to zoom out just a little bit so I can have the full image on my screen, and I'm going to keep a fairly large brush. Now, the first thing I like to do is sort of paint over most of the background, which causes our image to have a little bit more of that vignette look. It really brings the focus into what we're looking at here, which is the model's head, and we'll just darken those in just a touch. Now, if you don't want to work on the dodge and burn stuff on the same layer, you can always duplicate your background copy again. You can have multiple layers of this that you can roll back to. That's the beautiful thing about layers, is you always have that history. Next, I'm going to darken in just underneath here her neck where I want a little bit more shadow, and the bottoms of her torso and legs. And I'm going to darken in her neck just a little bit more here. Again, I keep a very mild effect, a low exposure, so that I can stack these effects. I don't want them to become too extreme too fast. I want to be able to gradually get the effect I want. Next, I'll switch over to my dodge tool, which is the lightning tool. And I'm going to just barely get the highlights here of the model's face. And this again is a 16% exposure on the midtones. This just allows us to make a few things pop a little more. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the eyes. And in order to do that, I'm going to add a curves layer to my image. And I'm going to click on the mid portion of the line, and I'm just going to punch that up just a bit. And what that does is overall lightens the entire image. So now that we have that, the only thing we want to apply that to is the eyes. And in order to do that, we need to layer mask just the eyes. So if you'll notice here on the layer palette, curves comes with a layer mask already. And in order to utilize that, we just have to click that layer mask and hit B on our keyboard to select our paintbrush tool. Now, I'm going to assume you know a little bit about Photoshop, or else you wouldn't be watching this tutorial. But for a layer mask, black removes the layer and white adds to the layer. And this is a non-destructive way of allowing that layer to affect only certain areas of the image beneath it. So now that I have my paintbrush tool selected, my colors are black and white, my foreground color, I should say, is black specifically, I'm going to hit Control-I on my keyboard, which allows me to invert the layer mask and essentially black out the entire thing. So now there's no areas of it affecting any part of this image. And I'm going to punch in real close on the eyeball, and I'm going to reduce my brush size pretty small here so I can get between these little pieces of cord. And I'm going to just barely paint in, I'm sorry, I need to switch this to white. Once I've zoomed in all the way on the eyeball, I'm going to use an opacity of 100 with a soft edged brush. We're looking at a 45 pixel brush with a hardness of 0, and my foreground color is white. What this will allow me to do is come in here between these little pieces of cord and just paint in that curves layer to brighten up these little bits of eyeball here. And all we're doing here is looking to bring that eye out just a tad. Now you can always go back and click on your curves, and you could really jack this up and make it crazy if you wanted to. But before you go off and do that, I would suggest you zoom out where you can see your whole image and see how that's going to affect it. But I am indeed going to punch that up just a little bit. Now the other thing that I'm noticing here on this eye is that it's lacking a eye light. It's lacking a catch light, so the eyes kind of look dead. And really that's probably fine for this particular image because, you know, it's kind of creepy, but I'm going to fake one in. In order to do that, I'm going to add a new layer that's just a blank layer. Paintbrush, soft edge, white as my foreground color. I'm going to make this thing kind of small, and I'm just going to paint a white couple of dots here on the eyeball. Now on my layers palette, I'm going to change that to a soft light blending mode, and what that will allow it to do is sort of blend in and make it look more like a realistic catch light. And if I don't like it, I can always make it bigger like that. And let me zoom out and we'll see how that looks. Now the eye has just a little bit of life in it. Okay, next up, I think this image is already looking pretty good as it is, but the next thing I want to do is I want to add in some atmosphere and some particle effects. In order to do that, I have a massive folder of just overlay images that I've saved over the years, bought, found from royalty-free sites, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that folder with all my textures and that sort of thing. And that's really all we're looking for here is textures, basically. And we'll find some that we think will fit the aesthetic of the image that we're working on. And I kind of like this one here, so I'm going to drag it onto my image. And I'm going to shape it to fit and match my image. So I want to rotate this clockwise, and I'm going to expand it to cover the entirety of my photo. I'm going to select OK because I like where it's positioned. Now, in order to get our image to show through this, we either have to mask it or we have to blend it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a blend mode of, say, we'll start with soft light. I do kind of like the way this looks. We can change it to overlay if we want a harsher effect. We could also change it to screen if we just wanted the bright areas. But I think I'm actually going to go with soft light. And now, this is where all of these masking layers come into effect, which is typically the bulk of the work that I do in Photoshop. So I'm going to add a layer mask to the image that I dropped in here, and I'm going to hit B on my keyboard to make sure I have a paintbrush selected so that I can mask out areas. And I'm going to get a larger sized brush with black as my foreground, and I'm going to make sure my opacity is lower, somewhere in the 25% range. And I'm just going to click and drag over the areas that I don't want that layer to affect. And basically I'm just painting out her face here because I want these effects to look like they're in behind, and to bring the distance between the background and the face out a little bit. And now I know we've got a very not opaque, very transparent brush, so if you want a more opaque mask, you can just click and drag over the area multiple times and it will eventually become fully transparent. So there, we've painted out our face. Now I'm going to go back to my folder full of textures and I'm going to find some more. Now you have to keep in mind that when you're doing this, you're looking at color and texture. I think this one's kind of cool looking. Let's put that in there. And we'll do the same thing. We'll just drag that to match the size of my image. I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to change this to overlay. I super dig that. Now I'm going to add a layer mask to this. And again, I don't want this to affect so much of the model as I do the background. So I'm going to be just painting over the layer mask area where I don't want the texture to take effect with a moderately transparent brush. And if I want it to be more transparent, I'll just paint over the area multiple times. I'm kind of digging the way that looks. I actually think that that's enough texturing for this image. That one worked out really well. Okay, so next up it's time to move on to the color grading aspect of the image, and for that, I know that I'm going to want to use my Drenger PSD pack. So I will open that in Photoshop, and that, you know, gives this image. And on this particular image, there is a bin full of layers. And I'm just going to drag that bin over here onto my photo, and it will apply that color grade to the image. And this is our end result. Now, I've got my image done. This is where I want it to be. I like what this looks like. I like the feel of this. I'm ready to save it. So now all I'm going to do is hit Control S on my keyboard, and you will notice down here in the bottom left that it is saving our file. Sometimes this takes a while, sometimes not so bad. Just sort of depends on how many layers you end up with. Okay, now that our image has finished saving, it will take us back to Lightroom, where it will have saved the image. And now from here you can export the image however you feel necessary. For me, I just export them all to one big folder and I call it good. And that's it. That's how I edit my photos. They take around a half an hour total to edit. Some take a little longer, some take a little bit less, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like to pick up a copy of my Drenger PSD color grading kit or any of the other ones that I've made, links are in the description below. You can head over to my Etsy shop. They're just a couple of bucks. They also include a video LUT. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be video, but you can use them for video if you want. At any rate, guys, also check out Discord. Join me and the community that we are bolstering over there. Share your work, because we want to see it. We want to know more about what you guys are doing and how you guys are putting some of this stuff to work. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them over there. If I can't answer them, somebody assuredly will. Want to be the biggest help I can be to the art and photography community, and I super appreciate your support. Also, keep in mind that I do have a Patreon, though I don't post a lot of stuff there. I'm going to try to get back to that. I'm also starting an OnlyFans where I can upload more of the photos that I take rather than just, you know, the few that get put on social media. That way you guys can support me a little bit there and see more of my work and be a bigger part of what's going on. And for that, guys, take it easy. See you in the next video. Peace.